This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The commander of the Islamic State is now dead. The group has gained a foothold in Africa. What does his death mean for the war against terrorism on the continent? Relative calm returns to Ethiopia's Oromia region after a week of protests. And an international police hunt continues for those responsible for the deaths of 39 people in a truck in England. Hello and welcome to CGTN. This is Africa Live and I'm Karen Roberts in Nairobi. Also coming up in the programme. In business, Egypt eyes an additional loan from the IMF in 2020 as reforms take shape. And South Africans optimistic of Springboks' chances ahead of the Rugby World Cup final. The commander of the Islamic State is now dead after evading capture for years. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was killed during an American commando raid in Syria. CGTN's Michelle Bar-David is at the Turkish border with Syria. She brings us more details.
U.S. President Donald Trump confirmed al-Baghdadi was hunted down by U.S. Special Forces and was killed when he detonated a suicide vest in Syria's Idlib province. No U.S. personnel were injured during the raid. Brutal, violent, merciless, al-Baghdadi was the leader of ISIS, a terrorist organization that is responsible for attacks all over the world and the deaths of thousands of civilians. The raid was carried out in coordination with several forces, including Iraq, Russia, Turkey, Syria, and the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces.
We received more detailed information about its movement and its whereabouts, and we shared it with the American and the coalitions, and we prepared the operation. Unfortunately, the Turkish attack over North and East Syria delayed the operation that was supposed to happen before, so currently we managed to confirm more the whereabouts and started the operation together with the international coalition, which led to the kill of al-Baghdadi.
Ahmed Mohammed, a shop owner in Barisha, says he witnessed the operation.
After the operation continued for another 2.5 hours, the sound of the aircraft disappeared from the air and we heard the sound of a reconnaissance aircraft. It was there for about 15 minutes. Then there was a strong sound of an explosion, very loud missiles. One missile, a second missile, and then a third with a huge explosion, so much so that it shattered the windows in houses a kilometer away from here.
The group, under al-Baghdadi's leadership, carried out countless atrocities such as beheadings, rape, and mass murder that shocked the international community. ISIS victims included members of the Yazidi minority, foreign journalists, and Jordanian pilot Muat al-Kasasbeh, who was burned alive in a cage.
I am proud and happy on this day after hearing of the death of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, this corrupt man, this insect, this virus that spread throughout the body of not only the Arab nation but also the Muslim nation, who distorted the image of Muslims and Islam.
In 2014, al-Baghdadi made his last public appearance in Mosul at the Grand Al-Nouri Mosque, where he declared ISIS to be a global caliphate. In the following years, it carried out multiple terrorist attacks worldwide. Turkey has been one of the countries most affected by ISIS, as the group carried out numerous terrorist attacks between the years of 2015 and 2016 that killed hundreds of civilians inside Turkey. Turkish security forces still continue to carry out operations to eliminate ISIS suspects across the country. But the group's power gradually declined. In 2017, ISIS lost its reign over Mosul and Raqqa. And earlier this year, the U.S. declared it was defeated. Leaders of several countries, including Israel, France, and the UK, congratulated the U.S. for the killing of al-Baghdadi, while Iran accused the U.S. of being the creator of the terrorist organization. The death of al-Baghdadi will no doubt be a blow to ISIS, but the group continues to operate in different regions, including Libya, Afghanistan, and the Philippines with sleeper cells around the world. Michal Bardavid, CGTN, Şanlıurfa.
Islamic State has, since 2015, claimed or been credited with numerous terrorist attacks across Africa. Most of these have taken place in the north and west of the continent. Various independent researchers, think tanks, UN agencies and credible media sources have linked the group to attacks in Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, Niger, Chad, Nigeria, Cameroon and Somalia. The group engages in various atrocities, including beheadings, rape and mass murder. In 2018, Islamic State claimed to have killed 181 people in Egypt's Sinai Peninsula, 73 in Somalia and 44 in Nigeria. At the same time, it has claimed attacks or a presence in the following countries: Burkina Faso, Mali, DRC, Algeria, Mozambique and Ethiopia. Well, for more on this, we are now joined by Dixon Osagi, a security analyst. He joins us live from Lagos. Thank you very much for joining us. World reaction to this news has been divided. In your opinion, what does the death of al-Baghdadi mean for the war against terrorism in Africa?
Oh, thank you so much, Taryn. Nice to be here again. The world was in jubilation after hearing the news of the death of al-Baghdadi, the leader of the Islamic State. Al-Baghdadi came into power in 2010 after taking over the lead, and he was recognized by his followers as the supreme spiritual leader of the Muslim worldwide. He made a lot of destructions, carried out a lot of terrorist acts against mankind. He took over Iraq, he took over Syria, and it's a good one. We're hearing that the American commandos have taken on him, and that is not the end of terrorism, because we must have to go back to the drawing board and remember that many years ago, 2011 precisely, Osama bin Laden was taken off, and that never eradicated terrorism. Also, we have here in Africa the leader of the former Boko Haram, Mohammed Yusuf, was also eliminated by the Nigerian government. That never take off terrorism from Nigeria. Now, al-Baghdadi is one of the most powerful terrorist leaders whose death came as a good news to the world. And now we have to understand this fact. When terrorism is being established, there are two factors: the operational method and the ideology. Yes, the U.S. have tried their best possible to eliminate the operational methodology of the Islamic States. Now, what about the ideology? I've said it time and again. Ideology is not a war you can eliminate within a day or two. Ideology could take till eternity. Now, a child who was given birth in 2010 under the ideology of an Islamic person, of the Islamic State would be 10 years now, and he will grow up with such ideology. And now this is a good avenue for the non-kinetic approach to come and take the lead in containing with this Islamic State, look into the dark network, their operational method, their enlistment method, and also go into the field, and also to ensure that they demobilize impending fighters or would-be fighters. And also the American government and the world should also concentrate on Iraq, Iran, and some other African nations that has bought into this ideology of the Islamic State.
Yes, sorry to interrupt
it's
you
a
there.
good one for the world, and I congratulate the world.
Some analysts have said that Islamic State's West Africa province is now one of the strongest ISIL affiliates, with some 4,000 fighters. Why has the group gained such a foothold on the continent?
Yeah, thank you very much, Taran. The truth is that when we talk about 4,000 fighters, for me and my own personal investigation, we have more than 4,000 fighters here. Even in Nigeria, we have more than 4,000 fighters. The reason why this group gained momentum here in Africa is because they saw the vulnerability and weakness of our security agencies. Our security agencies were supposed to go before the lost. When we talk about security, you're supposed to go before the lost. Go for the enemy. Put pressure on the enemy. Don't give the enemy opportunity to regroup, because your opportunity, your vulnerability is the enemy's opportunity. So our security agents failed to take hold of the enemy's vulnerability, which is supposed to be our opportunity. They allowed these guys to take a hold, capture territories, take over space. And our security forces here in the African region have never exhibited what we call territorial behavior. Territorial behavior is taking account of your territory. Nobody should come and put a flag in your territory. Go before the enemy. Don't allow the enemy to regroup. Don't allow them to take a very strong hold. So the reason why we have such kind of strong hold in Africa is because they believe that our security agencies are weak. Why are they weak? Because they are not well motivated. They are using the arms and ammunition. They are not using sophisticated arms and ammunition. I was privileged to join the army 22 years ago, and I was in the armored division. When I joined the army as a then, the arms and ammunition, the weaponry, the armor tanks that the Nigerian government used in fighting the civil war in 1967 was the same armor tank I met when I was 20 years old in the base. And such as the same armor tanks were the armor tanks that the Nigerian government pushed into the war against terrorism, and the armor tanks began to explode. Yes, the Nigerian government also tried their best to put in more funds to get more armor tanks and sophisticated weapons. Now, the only way forward to ensure that this group does not take a stronghold here in the African region is for the Nigerian government to keep putting pressure on the enemy, take a non-kinetic approach. The National Orientation Agency here in Nigeria should also engage the youth, because if most of these youth are jobless, there's what we call that's what we call psychological murder. If you don't give the youth jobs, they are suffering from psychological murder, and they can take the job from the enemy.
Dixon,
so it's good for us to ensure that the state government here in Africa and other parts of the African.
Dixon, I'd like to ask you one more question. In light of what has happened, the fall of ISIL, and now the leader, what do you see happening in the future with Islamic State in Africa?
The truth is that terrorism will not be eliminated with military might. The death of al-Baghdadi is not a sign of the fall of terrorism. It's only going to dissipate their strength. It's only going to weaken them up because this guy has successfully planted a lot of cells around the globe. What I want the American government and the world to also look at is to carry out a cover analysis on the enemy. Look at the criticality of this operation. Look at the accessibility of this operation. Look at the recoverability of this operation, and also look at the effect of the operation, and also recognize the enemy. When you carry out a cover analysis against your enemy, you'll be able to project the necessary force you need to eliminate these guys. Finally, we need to also look at the non-kinetic approach. Our world leaders, our spiritual leaders, need to also speak to these guys. The Islamic leaders need to also speak to these guys, because the name Islamic movement was not given by the Islamic world. It was just hijacked by this terrorist group. That is why they are taking stand and taking lead, and also gaining sympathy and advancing with speed and momentum. But the death of al-Baghdadi is a good one, and my advice is that the world should look at terrorism as a threat against this world, and also put their searchlights in Africa, because Africa is a very, very it's the stronghold of these guys. They want to make sure they have a very good stronghold here, then they can strike the world. So if they can put more eyes on Africa, ensure that African governments are bringing in arms and ammunition that they could use to contain these guys, then the non-kinetic approach will now come, organizational might and aid might, then terrorism will be history in Africa.
Okay, thank you very much for joining us. That was Dixon Osagi there, a security analyst in Lagos. Meanwhile, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has declared a nationwide state of emergency for another 3 months. Since 2013, Cairo has been working to eradicate terrorist groups, especially in the restive North Sinai region. CGTN's Adel El-Mahrouki has more.
On Saturday, the Egyptian president declared that the nation needs to impose another 3 months of emergency state. Since the deadly church's bomb attack in April 2017, the emergency state has been imposed.
Legally, this is not a direct continuation of the state of emergency, so it cannot be called an extension and doesn't need a referendum. It has become routine for Egypt to do so to maintain its continuity. The parliament still must approve first.
That declaration clearly indicates that Egypt still sees threats to its stability.
After a long period of calm, almost reaching 100%, especially in Sinai, we have returned once again to witnessing terrorist attacks that appear organized. Regional threats are expanding. Even those attacks that the authorities stop before happening are an indication that the fight against terrorism is far from over.
The state of emergency law gives the authorities the right to arrest and search without prior judicial permission, which the government says is essential to engage with suspects on the spot.
Critics warn that such powers could affect personal rights. The government, however, always rejects these claims. This is the 10th extension of the emergency state, and most probably it will not be the last. Since 2017, this exceptional state of law has become the norm for Egyptians. Adil Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Meanwhile, in Morocco, 7 suspected terrorists linked to Islamic State have been arrested by authorities there. The arrests were carried out in several areas, including Tamaris, Casablanca, Chefchaouen and Ouazaine. The Interior Ministry says the group was planning to set up base in Ouazaine. There are also reports that those arrested were in contact with an explosives expert within Islamic State, and weapons were recovered in their homes. Suspects are in custody and investigations to capture possible accomplices continue. To Ethiopia now, where relative calm has returned to the Oromia region after a week of protests that claimed at least 67 lives. Officials say 70 people have been arrested in connection with the unrest. The violence broke out after a high-profile activist accused security forces of trying to orchestrate an attack against him. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has vowed to bring those responsible to justice. CGTN's Giram Chala has more.
In towns like Adama, Ambo and Hararge, where recent clashes and protests were widely seen, things are slowly returning to normalcy. And most cities across Oromia, the largest regional state under the federal government of Ethiopia, are calm. So far, and according to official reports, about 67 people have been killed and hundreds were injured due to the violence triggered after security details of Jawar Mohammed, a prominent Oromo activist and director of OMN TV, are said to be removed by the government. Soon, the situation has turned into both ethnic and religious-based clash, resulting into loss of lives and damage of properties. Police said at least 6 of its members were killed while on duty, and it has arrested 70 people so far. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed promised to bring perpetrators to justice and contain the violence. Still, many fear the situation is fresh and the country is fragile unless a quick and effective plan is laid to avoid any return of clash. Group Tala CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
A delegation of Ugandan members of parliament are currently visiting Somalia. The delegation seeks to assess the welfare of the country's troops serving under the African Union mission in Somalia. The legislators have so far received briefing on the status of AMISOM's mandate in the fight against terrorism, achievements made and challenges in implementing the Somalia transition plan from AMISOM's senior leadership team. The MPs are set to meet and hold discussions with the President of Somalia, Mohamed Abdullah Mohamed, and the Speaker of the lower house of the federal parliament during their visit.
We want to thank you for the changes you have made to this city, beginning from this city and down to the whole country. We now thank the troops who are here at the AMISOM and know that Somalia can now move with the rest of Africa because of the changes we have seen.
We are able to evaluate the progress so far and considered the fact that so much has been done and yet there is still a lot to be done. And they believe that as a government and parliament, they are now in a better position to appreciate the challenges of the mission, and that they will engage diplomatically, politically, and also through the executive, reinforce their support to the mission through the contingency.
We are going to a short break now. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including concerns growing over worsening drought situation in various parts of South Africa. And an international police hunt continues for those responsible for the deaths of 39 people in a truck in England.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
An international police hunt continues for those responsible for the deaths of 39 people in a truck in England. The 25-year-old driver has been charged with manslaughter. In Vietnam, the anguish continues for families who believe their relatives are among the victims. CG10's Richard Bestick now reports.
The international police dragnet now encompasses England as well as Ireland and Belgium. In addition to those manslaughter charges, Robinson, in whose truck the 39 victims were discovered, has been charged with people trafficking, immigration offences and money laundering. The others, a man and a woman, both 38, from England's north-west, have been bailed until November 11th, and a 45-year-old man from Northern Ireland has been bailed till November 13th. All three had been questioned on suspicion of manslaughter and conspiracy to traffic people. This has been a fast-moving criminal investigation which began with the gruesome discovery of the bodies on Wednesday. It's a complex investigation, say Essex Police, which will take time.
We have to gain so much information as we go through to make sure that we don't miss anything. All of that takes time, and it will continue, unfortunately, to take time.
With little in the way of identifying documents, police say it's not yet possible to say the nationalities of the victims. Some families in Vietnam believe their relatives were among the 39 found dead. For the father of 26-year-old Pham Thi Tra Mai, it is a time of terrible anguish. She had texted her family, it's thought possibly from the container, to say she couldn't breathe, she was dying.
Hoảng loạn hết cả nhà, nói chung là cái cảm giác là không thể tả nổi, đau đớn không thể tả nổi. Lúc đó thì cả nhà là qua lên là không có cái cảm giác nào để mà tả nổi, rất chi là đau đớn.
The criminal investigation continues. Maurice Robinson, the driver of the truck, due to appear in court Monday. Richard Bestick, CGTN, Police Headquarters, Essex, England.
Well, the Chinese Foreign Ministry has commented on the situation in southeast England. It said it was waiting for authorities in the UK to make a formal statement on the identities of the victims.
目前，英国警方仍在对此案进行调查。
British police are still investigating the case and have briefed the public on its progress. The Chinese embassy in London has been in close contact with the British authorities, asking the UK government to provide more effective information to further verify the identities of the victims. No matter where the victims came from, this is a very unfortunate tragedy. Illegal migration and human trafficking are global challenges, requiring concerted efforts by the international community. China is ready to work actively with all other countries on this.
Heading over to South Africa now, where recent drought and poorly maintained infrastructure is pushing the nation's long-standing water crisis to the brink. With taps running dry in several provinces, concerns are mounting, and municipalities are pressuring the government to declare a national disaster. Along with higher temperatures, dam levels in parts of the country are lower than levels last year. More residents could face water restrictions in the coming months. The Western Cape is one of the worst affected regions, with $3.4 million released last week for emergency relief. Well, for more on this, we are now joined by Angelo Coppola in Johannesburg for us. Can you give us some more details on the drought and perhaps the worst affected areas?
Well, Karen, I was speaking to Paul Makube, a senior agricultural economist at First National Bank, and he says that the slight rains in Mpumalanga province still bode well for the season in terms of crop growing, and the planting window there did open at the beginning of the month, so it's not bad news on that side. In terms, so it also did receive some near normal rain for the last 3 months of September, which is good news. The issue really is around whether it's going to help the summer grains and the oil seeds, as the planting window there, I'm told, is up and running right now. So we're waiting to see what's going to happen on that front. There's still a decent amount of rain that's needed to ensure a good crop, but also we need to increase or improve the pasture conditions, I'm told, for livestock, because that'll alleviate the pressure on the irrigated and dryland fruit and vegetables that are growing and about to enter their growing season right now. Meanwhile, parts of the northwest, the northern and the eastern Cape provinces are badly affected in terms of livestock that's been lost there. There are 2 dams, or in fact there are only 2 dams that are below the average at the moment of the 10 top quantity dams in the country. Those are above 60%, I'm told. In the Western Cape, there are 3 citrus supporting dams that are doing well. There's a dam there that is below average, but the citrus crop seems to be fairly safe at the moment because that dam is above the 50% level. So it's a bit of a patchy situation at the moment, but there are drought concerns because of the lateness of the rain in certain areas, Karen.
And Angelo, the Minister of Human Settlements, Water and Sanitation, Lindiwe Sisulu, is expected to address these issues today. What can we expect, do you think, from this briefing?
Well, Karen, we haven't had sight of her speech just yet, but she did inherit a mess of a department, according to some analysts. That's from her predecessor. The failure of the sanitation side of her portfolio can be seen in what's happened to the Vaal River, which is one of the main rivers in South Africa, with the army brought in a couple of months ago to try and clear that river near the dam of free-flowing sewage that's been pumped into it from various parts of the country. The water provision side, however, there the situation is compounded in terms of the drought by the closure of the Lesotho Highlands water tunnel, and that's for maintenance, and that's probably going to last until the end of November. But knowing how construction works, it's probably going to take a bit longer, so it's making it worse. We've also heard that the Katse and Mohale dams in Lesotho, which also feed into South Africa, are also at near record level lows of 13.6% and 32.7%. The upside there is the Sterkfontein Dam on the South African side is at good levels of around 91%. So it's a good news story to tell in terms of that one dam, but the bottom line is the minister's sitting with her hands tied behind her back because it's not going to be quickly changed in terms of the water provision side and the sanitation side. Karen?
Okay, thank you very much. That was Angelo Coppola there for us in Johannesburg on the drought situation in South Africa. On to Somalia now, where parts of Beledweyne have been completely flooded. Hundreds of thousands of residents have fled to higher ground. Well, the government is now appealing to the international community for humanitarian assistance. CG10's Abdulaziz Billo reports from Mogadishu.
Marian Mahmoud is building a makeshift structure on the outskirts of Beledweyne. She is among thousands who have fled flooding in one of the biggest towns in central Somalia. Shabelle River has broken its banks, overflowing into the city. Water levels have risen due to heavy rains experienced in most parts of the country. Homes, local government headquarters, schools, hospitals and business centers have been closed. Locals have been forced to move to higher grounds for their own safety. Residents say they're in desperate need of clean water, food, temporary latrines and shelter.
I moved here with my family due to the floods. We were unable to salvage our properties. Most of it was submerged due to the flooding inside the city. We are now living in makeshift structures and we don't have access to clean water or toilets.
Shabelle River has broken its banks and water flooded Beledweyne city. We are now displaced in this camp known as El Jale. Most of my neighbors also fled to this place. Living in the city became impossible.
Local authorities say 4 children have lost their lives since the flooding began last week.
3 neighborhoods have been hit the worst by the floods. Up to 55,000 people have fled from the city, and we expect the number to rise. The Shabelle River originates from Ethiopia, and we have received reports that water level has risen and is flowing our way. We anticipate more internally displaced persons, and we call for immediate assistance to alleviate the suffering of these vulnerable families.
The government has appointed a ministerial committee to coordinate relief efforts in the region, after coming under sharp criticism for failing to tackle recurrent flooding in that part of the country.
The committee will work with local administrations in flood-affected regions. My administration's priority in the next few days will be to coordinate relief efforts in these areas. I appeal to the international community to channel all humanitarian support towards those affected.
Floods have hit the central Somali town of Beledweyne for the second time in less than 2 years. Aid agencies estimate that more than 140,000 people, including 70,000 children, have been forced to flee rising floodwaters in the region, with that number expected to rise to 300,000 in the coming days. Abdulaziz Bilon, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
We've got all the business news coming up for you after the break, including Egypt eyes an additional loan from the IMF in 2020 as reforms take shape. And UK MPs vote on December vote call amidst certainty over Brexit extension.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Egypt is reviewing plans to seek an additional loan facility from the IMF by the end of March 2020. That's according to the country's finance minister. Mohamed Mait says Egypt is committed to implementing reforms to drive growth. The commitment includes pressing ahead with IPOs of several state-owned companies. At the moment, Egyptian authorities and the Washington-based lender are in talks on the next round of key reforms aimed at boosting economic growth. Egypt signed a $12 billion extended fund facility with the fund in 2016. The reforms agenda, which expires next month, helped end a major dollar shortage and pull the country out of an economic crisis. Let's shift focus now to Brexit, and the European Union has agreed to extend the Brexit deadline until January the 31st next year. According to the President of the European Council, Donald Tusk, the bloc is allowing for a so-called flextension. This means that Britain could leave before the October the 31st deadline if a deal was approved by UK Parliament. The EU's decision comes on the same day British lawmakers decide on the best way to end the current Brexit deadlock. More than 3 years since voting to leave the European Union, the British Parliament remains divided over how, when and whether to leave the bloc. Meanwhile, British lawmakers are expected to vote on Boris Johnson's bid for a December the 12th general election. The Prime Minister says that he'll restart moves to get his Brexit deal bill into law if the motion is passed. From London, here's CGTN's Nawid Jabakal.
You know what they say, if at first you don't succeed, try, and try again. Boris Johnson will do just that when he attempts to win support for a general election for a third time here in Parliament. We're expecting that to happen on Monday, and he's pushing for an election on December 12th. But he'll need 2/3 of the 650 lawmakers in the Commons to back his plans for it to go through, and it seems some smaller parties may be warming to the idea of a poll. Scotland's SNP, as well as the Liberal Democrats, have written a letter to the EU saying they'll back a poll on an earlier date on December 9th, but only if Britain and the EU agree to extend the current Brexit deadline from the end of this month to the end of January 2020. That's something that the Prime Minister has ruled out. But this really is a numbers game. If he is to get a 2/3 majority, he's probably going to have to rely on the support of the major party in opposition, the Labour Party, which has said it won't back an election unless a no-deal Brexit or Britain crashing out of the European Union is taken completely off the table. So plenty to potentially watch out for in the coming days, and it could be a crunch week for Brexit, but the sense you get is that we've been here before, so don't expect too much clarity on when Britain's going to leave the European Union. Nawid Jabakil, CGTN, London.
Elsewhere, China Development Bank has signed a $629 million loan agreement with Nigeria. The loan will help finance Africa's biggest oil producer's first deep sea port in the commercial capital of Lagos. The facility is being built by Singapore-based developer Tolaram Group and state-owned construction firm China Harbour Engineering Company. Once completed, the multi-purpose port would cover an area of 90 hectares with 3 container berths. It's also projected to generate over 200,000 jobs and about $350 billion in revenue, which is a major boost to Nigeria's economy.
What we're trying to do is to stimulate the economic growth, of that zone, and also provide an alternative to Apapa encampment, and it's going to be the deepest seaport in the whole of Nigeria.
For Nigeria, we'll have a very modernized, completely new port, and this port will improve the infrastructure of Nigeria, and in the meantime, we'll provide the basic infrastructure facilities to attract more and more other potential investors and also create job opportunity for the local community.
Cape Town International Airport is forging ahead with an ambitious new infrastructure project. The $460 million expansion program will increase the South African airport's capacity for both domestic and international arrivals. It'll also tap into the growing global outbound travel market. With more on this, here's CGTN's Travis Andrews.
Cape Town International Airport may have been crowned the best airport in Africa for the last 3 years, but it's not content with just accolades. It's on an aggressive expansion program to make it the world's best. The airport is about to undergo a more than $460 million expansion upgrade that will see it increase its capacity for both domestic and international arrivals, with a particular focus being placed on being a hub for long-haul travel.
There is an opportunity for what often is referred to South-South, where you start linking the East with the Southern Americas, for example, and that is an opportunity. But we've got a big market already to play on where we go direct routes.
15 new routes and 20 expanded routes make the airport a particularly profitable asset for Airports Company South Africa, which is why such a significant investment was easy to pass muster. A one-way realignment set for 2020 construction means the airport can finally accept much larger aircraft, such as the Airbus A380, which will bring more tourists with more additional spend.
This airport will gain a lot of additional capacity, so the additional flight routes access will be able to boost both trade as well as tourism, not only in terms of your normal passenger numbers, we're also looking at cargo, logistics, so anything trade-related will push, so the timing is absolutely perfect.
The expansion will also increase the airport's capacity. After international arrivals increased by 9% for 2019, and China remains one of the top long-haul markets where AXA is keen to push through increased direct connectivity.
That is an absolute key market. We already see relatively good connectivity. There is all the reason in the world for us to vie for a direct connection between Cape Town and China. We would love to see that coming to fruition. It's a key market for us.
Cape Town International Airport's success can also be attributed to its association with the Air Access Initiative, which seeks to boost more inbound flights into the mother city. And with Cathay Pacific already providing connectivity to China, the airport remains on track to forge ahead with its South-South ambitions, which will place Cape Town a lot closer to the beating pulse of international long-haul travel. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
Well, we're going to a short break now, lots more to come, including... After 22 years of absence, opera Aida makes a comeback to Luxor in Egypt.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The opera Aida by the Italian composer Verdi was being performed in Egypt after a 22-year absence. The two-night show took place in the historic city of Luxor at the Temple of Hatshepsut. CGTN's Yasser Hakim has more.
Opera Aida is back in town. The opera has been widely popular worldwide and has its connections with Egypt.
It's an Egyptian love story between Radames and Aida, and the whole crowd loves it. And it was produced a long time ago, actually 150 years ago, with the opening of Suez Canal. The story is begun from Luxor, and the story is from Egypt, so anyone would come to Egypt will definitely feel the same ambience and the same breathe of the history.
The media here have given it extra attention. Celebrities and dignitaries attended the two performances in Luxor after an absence of 20 years.
But Opera Aida is not only a good and famous performance, but it is also now one of the elements to attract tourism to Egypt.
It has been performed in front of the Great Pyramids of Giza before.
Whenever it plays at any part of the world, it has their own followers. So many people who likes the opera and likes this event, they like to follow it, especially when it's done in its origin and it's the place where it meant to be. We're very happy and excited to receive around 4,000 people to this event. And I think it will promote the musical event, and I think it's a soft weapon to attract more people to come to Egypt and prove to them such a love Egyptian story in the heart of Luxor. The average room rate in Luxor have increased tremendously, and there is no enough availability in Luxor during the opening of Aida.
Many tourists come to Egypt for the sun, the sea, the water sports and safaris. Officials hope events like Opera Aida in Luxor would attract more of another type of tourist, the ones who prefer to visit museums, temples, monuments and cultural events. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
To South Africa now. Cromwell Ngobeni is an artist whose work invokes an emotional reaction. Ngobeni portrays human figures in open spaces. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela brings us closer.
Cromwell Ngobeni's art is influenced by the way he was raised. He grew up with so much violence around him. This, he says, became a huge challenge in his life. He portrays this in his work. Ngobeni uses his work as catharsis and as well as raising awareness.
So my work portrays the story of where I'm from and who I am,
And then what I can say is that I used to be bullied when I was a kid, and then I had to fight back just to protect myself. So by fighting back, I became a bully as well. So it's more like being a victim and a perpetrator.
Cromwell uses dark expressive lines to depict his intense emotional feelings. He contrasts the lines with strong tonal values.
What I can say is 2014, my sister was passed on, and then she was a victim of abuse. So me trying to break the cycle of what's happening, so I've tried to put that on paper instead of chasing the guy or searching for the guy, and yeah, just to pay revenge and all that. So yeah, so what I can say is that I look on what's happening and then also how I feel at that time, so then put it on the paper. So that's what I normally do. So I use human figure to tell a story, and then in different emotions, and then I use a kid a lot. So the kid is, it represents myself as an artist.
The artist uses a variety of tools to illustrate his art.
I use charcoal, and then I use pastels, and then besides that, I'm a printmaker. So I use lino cut, etching, and monotypes to tell the story of everything.
So I asked him how he discovered that he has this kind of talent.
Okay, for me that's interesting. I can say it's different from other artists. So I have a brother, his name is Sitfree. I'm a Blanet, that's how they call him. So, and a cousin, his name is Tlandla. So those two gentlemen, they're the one that got my interest into art. So they used to draw a lot. I used to carry my brother's sketch pad to school while I was in grade 3. So, and then he used to have a lot of commissions, and then I've tried to fit myself in and then start drawing. So one day I remember I have done the portrait about Tukulu from TKZ, and he said, "Who did this?" And I said, "I did this." He said, "Wow, this is great. You'll now going to help me with my commissions." And then that's why everything started.
Cromwell Ngobeni's only wish now is to have his work to be spread far and wide. Yodisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
All of the sports news coming up for you after the break, including South Africans optimistic of Springboks' chances ahead of the Rugby World Cup final.